Are you ready to break free from the doubts and limits holding you back? Welcome to Embrace Your Value, where therapy meets coaching to help you unlock your true worth and take control of your life.
Hi, I'm Kristen, a trauma therapist dedicated to helping you heal, break old patterns, and reclaim your power.
And I'm Jen, your support coach, here to show you how to set fierce boundaries, embrace self-compassion, and step boldly into the life you deserve.
So whether you're stuck in self-doubt or feeling lost, know this: your value isn't up for negotiation. It's time to own it.
Every week, we tackle real issues that challenge, inspire, and empower you to live with purpose and confidence.
So grab your favorite drink, take a deep breath, and let's get started.
Because you're not here to play small. It's time to embrace your value. Today, we're talking about something that almost no one prepares you for when you start doing personal growth work. And that is what happens when your growth starts challenging your relationships. A lot of people begin a personal development journey because they want to feel better about themselves. They want more clarity, more peace, more confidence. I know that's one of the things that I wanted when I started down this path, was definitely more confidence. They want to understand their patterns and start making healthier choices. What many people don't realize is that when you change internally, your relationships don't always stay the same. Sometimes they deepen, they grow. The relationship grows with you. And this isn't just intimate relationships. This could be relationships with your parents. It could be relationships with siblings, with friends. It can be any kind of a relationship. Sometimes those relationships become more honest, and sometimes they become uncomfortable because growth changes the way you show up. You may start speaking up when you used to stay quiet. You may start setting boundaries when you used to say yes to everything. You may start honoring your needs instead of pushing them aside. And while those changes are healthy, they can definitely shift dynamics that have existed for years. Suddenly, people around you are adjusting to a version of you that they've never seen before. And that can bring up a lot of mixed emotions. They may be happy for you, especially in the beginning. Oh, I'm so proud of what you're doing. This is fantastic. This is great. They may feel some relief that you're getting help, that you're doing the things you want to do. Also, guilt, fear, and sometimes even grief show up for them. And they may not even understand it. They also may stay in the same place. And as you grow, you can tend to outgrow each other. And that's a really scary place to be on either side of it. So today, Kristen and I want to talk about why personal growth can change relationships, why that can feel so unsettling, and how to move through that transition with compassion for yourself and for others.
Yes, Jen, and I'm really glad that we're talking about this because relationship shifts are one of the most common experiences people have when they begin doing deeper personal work. From a psychological perspective, relationships tend to settle into patterns. Over time, people unconsciously develop roles with each other. Someone might be the helper. Someone might be the peacekeeper. Someone might be the responsible one. Someone might be the person who avoids conflict. These are generally things that we learned in childhood that are our wounds and this is how they show up in our relationships. These rules aren't really discussed directly, right? This is the settling into the pattern. They develop gradually through repeated interactions, situations that go unresolved a lot of times, that they don't get discussed. And once that pattern is established, it often feels stable to everyone involved because it's familiar, even if that pattern isn't healthy. So when someone begins personal growth work and starts changing their behavior, that can disrupt the balance, the cycle, the pattern that the relationship was actually built around. For example, if someone who has always been accommodating, saying yes to everything, suddenly begins setting boundaries, maybe saying no, the other person may feel confused or even threatened by that change. Not because the boundary is wrong, but because the relationship is adjusting to a new dynamic. This is something I talk to people about all the time as we do growth work. It's important to understand that this reaction is often about familiarity, not fairness. So it's about what do we know, not about what do we think or feel is fair. People get used to interacting with you in a certain way, and sometimes a very specific way. And when that changes, it requires both people to renegotiate the terms of the relationship, right? The boundaries, the terms, the boundaries, the rules, like however you want to put it, but how the relationship gets conducted. That adjustment period can feel uncomfortable for both parties, especially if the old pattern was deeply ingrained. And again, this isn't just romantic or intimate relationships. This can be with a parent, this can be with a child or a friend or a coworker. Discomfort doesn't mean the growth is a mistake. And I think a lot of people, when they start becoming uncomfortable, they think that what they're doing is wrong. What it really means, oftentimes, is that the relationship is moving into new territory.
Yeah, this is such an important point because I know for me, I see this all the time with women I coach as well. They start doing the really meaningful work on themselves. They begin to recognize their worth. They start listening to their own needs and even speaking up for them. They start saying no in places where they used to overextend themselves. They maybe even stop over-explaining all the time. And at first, it really does feel empowering. But then something shifts for them. Someone in their life reacts differently than they expect them to. Maybe a friend seems distant. Maybe a family member becomes defensive. Maybe a coworker pushes back. And they start thinking, am I being selfish? Did I go too far? Maybe I should just go back to the way things were. I was a peacekeeper. Let's just go back to the way things were. But what's actually happening is that relationship is just adjusting. When you stop over functioning in a relationship, it changes the space. When you stop rescuing people, stop taking on their emotions so that they feel better, it really does change everything because now they don't know how to act. And that's not yours to own. That's theirs to figure out. You don't have to fix that for them. They have to be in the discomfort and figure out how to change and what they need to do. And maybe they don't want to do anything, and that's fine. We can't do it for them. Sometimes that just reveals that overfunctioning, when we stop it, that reveals dynamics that were always there, but they were never acknowledged. For example, if someone was used to you always being available, your boundary may highlight the fact that the relationship depended on your constant availability. Have you ever had that person in your life that never reaches out to you, but you're always reaching out to them? You're always the one calling them to initiate the conversation, initiate the plans, doing all of that. And then one day you go, I haven't done that in a while, and I haven't heard from that person. And then you go to reach out to them and you think, I'll reach out to them. And their response is, gosh, I haven't heard from you in forever. That right there, that's your sign. That's the sign that you're doing the growth work and that they're still there waiting on you to show them when you're available and take the lead. That's not always okay. It can be, but it's not always. There is some good news, though. It doesn't mean the relationship is doomed. It does mean the relationship now has an opportunity to evolve. And evolution can feel messy while it's happening.
Yes. And there's another emotional layer here that often surprises people. Growth can sometimes bring grief very unexpectedly. Not grief over losing someone, although that can happen. It's what we've been talking about. But grief over realizing that certain relationships were built around versions of you that no longer fit. When you grow, you may start noticing things you didn't notice before. Maybe you see patterns of imbalance. Maybe you recognize emotional labor you've been carrying. Maybe you realize you've been prioritizing harmony over honesty. Those realizations can be both liberating and sad. Two things can be true at the same time. It doesn't mean one's right and what's wrong. Because it can mean acknowledging that some connections were sustained by patterns that weren't truly supportive of who you are becoming. And again, that doesn't mean that relationships have to end or that relationship has to end. Many relationships can and do grow stronger when people begin showing up more authentically. But the transition period often requires patience, grace, and some nervous system regulation. Patience with yourself as you learn new ways of relating, and patience with others as they adapt to those changes.
One of the most reassuring things I tell people during this stage is that healthy relationships are capable of evolving. If a relationship has mutual respect, curiosity, and care, it will usually find a way to adjust. It may take some honest conversations. It may take some time for both people to get comfortable with new boundaries or expectations. Those relationships often become deeper because they are no longer built on unspoken roles. They are built on truth. And that's actually a much stronger foundation. At the same time, growth sometimes reveals that certain relationships were sustained primarily by old unhealthy patterns. And when those patterns shift, the relationship may naturally change as well. And that can be difficult. But it also creates space for connections that support the person that you're becoming. The key is to remember that growth isn't about abandoning people. It's about showing up more honestly for yourself and in the relationships that matter.
One of the most compassionate ways to approach this process is to remember that everyone is learning as they go. There are no rule books that we are handed as humans, and no two humans are exactly the same. So there needs to be grace and understanding. You are learning to show up more authentically, and the people around you would be learning how to relate to that version of you. Change can feel unsettling at first because familiarity often feels safer than honesty because we are drawn to the familiar. But relationships that grow alongside your personal development can become incredibly meaningful. They allow space for both people to evolve. They create room for clear communication, and they support a deeper sense of mutual respect. So if you find yourself in a season where your growth is changing your relationships, try not to interpret that shift as a problem. Often, it's simply a sign that your life is expanding in ways that require new patterns. Growth rarely leaves everything exactly as it was. And I would hope not, right? That's the whole thing about growth, right? Is that we change. But it often leads to connections that are more aligned with who you truly are.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up today, we want to invite you to reflect on something this week. Think about one relationship in your life that has felt different as you've grown. Not necessarily worse, just different. Maybe the conversations have changed. Maybe the expectations have shifted. Maybe you're showing up in a new way. Just notice what that relationship is teaching you about who you're becoming. And if this episode resonated with you, we would love to hear about it. You can drop us a message in the comments, or you can even share this episode with someone who might also be navigating growth in their relationships. Because one of the most reassuring things to realize is that you're not alone on this journey. There are other people that are going through some of the same things. Going to be exactly the same, but they're similar. And if you can connect with them and show them that you see them and they see you, that's a beautiful way to start a brand new relationship. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for being here with us today.
If today's episode hit home, don't just keep it to yourself. Subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Because everyone deserves to know their worth.
Next week, we're diving even deeper with more insights and tools to help you break free from limitations and live authentically.
Until then, keep raising your standards, owning your worth, and embracing your value.